Hello, welcome to another video, another day, another video. Still going strong with Vida. It's going well. But today, as you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, we are talking about my TBR Vets. Books that have been on my TBR for far too long. Books I've had for such a long time and still want to read eventually. I just really don't know when I'm gonna get to them. I've got a list of 10. I don't necessarily know if these are 10 that have been on the shelves for the longest, but they're 10 that feel like they've been on the shelves for longest. I feel like these 10 books have been hanging over me for quite a long time now, and I should probably read them. So here we have a TBR Vets video. In my TBR Pursuit prompt card deck, there is a card for Read a TBR Vet, but I've never had like a point of reference for that. So here is that point of reference if it matches the genre that it pops up for, obviously. But yeah, TBR Vets, books that I really need to get around to reading. But before we dive into the list of 10 books, I would like to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which is Skillshare. Now, you have definitely heard me speak about Skillshare before, or you've heard someone else speak about Skillshare before. You've definitely heard of it. It is an online learning platform for creative people like you and I, full of classes on all sorts. There is photography, there is video editing, there is animation, there is illustration, there is typography, there is all sorts of creative subjects that you could think of. There is something on Skillshare. Creative writing is one that I've been looking into a little bit myself. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much because I'm not a writer and I don't think I would ever write, but if I ever did, like, I feel like I've got a good base. Like, I'm a big reader. It'd be interesting to see, like, if my brain could come up with anything. So I've been digging into some creative writing classes myself. And the one that I've stumbled upon that I am looking into taking is Creative Writing Bootcamp, Start a Brand New Story by Myla Goldberg. Which is basically an introductory class, I suppose, to creating ideas and where ideas come from, and exercises that you can do to develop your ideas. Some of the classes involved in this one are eavesdropping for inspiration, what did that feel like, build a character, writing real feeling people. There's one called Being a Tree, which sounds interesting, but it's ways to practice your writing, practice empathy, learning to observe, learning to write dialogue, things like that. And it's a good mix of listening to the teacher talk through the class, but also the exercises that they encourage you to take. And that's something that Skillshare classes are really great with. They're always a great mix of listening to the wisdom of the teacher of that class, but also the exercises that they encourage you to do to be involved and actively engage with that class. The platform of Skillshare is super easy to use, super easy to navigate, and it is curated specifically for learning. So there's no ads, you can just go wherever your learning takes you and learn to your heart's content. And with an annual subscription, it's less than $10 per month. So not going to break the bank to get you some knowledge. But if a subscription is not something that you're quite ready to commit to, then I am happy to let you know that the first 1,000 people to click the link down in my description can get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. Thank you ever so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get into my TBR Vets. These are in no particular order. Some of these I've definitely spoken about more than others, but let's kick it off with The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I've spoken about this so many times about how intimidating it is, and not just because of its size. Like, its size doesn't even intimidate me anymore. Like, I've got used to reading bigger books. There's just something about this that scares me. But this has been on my TBR for such a long time. This copy was actually gifted to me by G for Christmas years ago now. My mum has read this, which is why it looks read. I just haven't yet, and I need to. So this deserves top spot on this TBR Vets video. It's been here for such a long time, I will get to it eventually, I promise. This follows the story of Kvothe. It's told from Kvothe's perspective. I believe he's giving his life story. Something about him is like legendary and he's never told his life story, and he decides to tell his life story. It will take him 3 days, and the 3 books in this series are the 3 days it takes him. However, the 3rd book is still not out. Will it ever be? Who knows? But because it's told from his perspective, he's an unreliable narrator. He makes himself seem like he's the best at everything. But I don't know too much about this. I don't know why he's a legend. I don't know what's so special about him, but his name is Kvothe. You may have heard of him. I don't know. I will get to it eventually though. I think I'm gonna love it. Lots of people loved it, and I don't know if it's the intimidation because so many people have loved it or because it's been like just hanging over me for so long. I don't know, but here it is. Next up, this is probably the oldest book on my TBR. American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This is about gods on Earth as humans, I think. Days before his release from prison, Shadow's wife, Laura, dies in a mysterious car crash. Numbly, he makes his way back home. On the plane, he encounters an enigmatic Mr. Wednesday who claims to be a refugee from a distant war, a former god, and the king of America. Together, they embark on a profoundly strange journey across the heart of the USA, whilst all around them a storm of preternatural and epic proportions threatens to break. This has been on my TBR for such a long time. I really like Neil Gaiman. I've liked everything I've read from him. Neverwhere was one of my favourite books ever. It's definitely been knocked down a few pegs by some of my more recent favourite books, but before I started BookTube, Neverwhere was one of my absolute favourites, and that was why I got this. So I've had this since before I did BookTube, because I loved Neil Gaiman. I mean, I still do, I just still haven't read this. I've been on BookTube for a few years now, and I still haven't read this, so I need to pull myself together and get to it at some point. Pris has challenged me to read it this year. I don't see that happening, personally, but you never know. I've been told that the audiobook is really good, and you know what? The size of it isn't even that scary. 635, like, it's not even that big. I'll get to it at some point, I promise. Next up, we have Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. This was like one of my first cover buys of BookTube. I think it's beautiful. However, I have been told by numerous sources that this isn't great and I just shouldn't bother and I should unhaul it. However, I'm attached to it at this point. Like, it's been on my shelf for such a long time. It's such a beautiful book. I just love the look of it. I feel like I should at least give it a go. I do DNF books. If I get a little ways in and realise that it isn't great and I should have listened and unhauled it, I'll just DNF it, that's fine. I want to at least try it. This has something to do with time travel, I'm pretty sure. New York City, present day. One night, Etta Spencer is wrenched from everything she knows and loves, thrown into an unfamiliar world. She can be certain of only one thing: she's travelled not just miles but years from home. The Atlantic, 1776. Captain Nicholas Carter is tasked with delivering Etta to the dangerous Ironwood family. They are searching for something, a stolen object they believe only she can reclaim, but Nicholas is drawn to his mysterious passenger, and the closer he gets to her, the further he is from freedom. The edges of the world. Together, Etta and Nicholas embark on a perilous journey across centuries and continents, piecing together clues left behind by a desperate thief. But Etta plays deeper into the Ironwood's game. Treacherous forces threaten to separate her not only from Nicholas, but from her path home forever. Timey-wimey stuff. I don't know. We'll see if I read the whole thing, but it's been on my shelf for such a long time. One of my first cover buys of BookTube. Will I ever read it? Hopefully, one day, I'll give it a go at least. Sticking with the timey-wimey theme, Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is one that I think I'm gonna love. This is like a 5-star prediction for me. I think this is gonna mess with my head just the right amount. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's not a big one. There's nothing about this that's intimidating other than how much I think I'm gonna love it. But it's been on my TBR for such a long time. I don't know when I bought this. This has been on my TBR for a long time, and I do now have Recursion by Blake Crouch as well, and I don't want to read that one until I've read this one. So to prevent that one from becoming a TBR vet as well, I need to read this one at some point. This has had some rave reviews from people I know and trust. It's G from Book Roast's one of her favourites. I think I'm gonna love it. It's about a man who gets mixed up in time, I think. Are you happy in your life? Those are the last words Jason Dessen hears before the masked abductor knocks him unconscious, before he awakes to find himself strapped to a gurney surrounded by strangers in hazmat suits. Before the man he's never met smiles down at him and says, "Oh, welcome back." This is the world he's woken up to. Jason's life is not the one he knows. His wife is not his wife, his son was never born, and Jason is not an ordinary college physics professor. Is it this world or the other that's the dream? The answer lies in a journey more wondrous and horrifying than anything Jason could have imagined. Timey-wimey stuff, alternate universes, sounds great! I will get there eventually. It's just been on my TBR and hanging over me for such a long time. I'll get there. Next up, I have Ever the Hunted by Erin Summerall, a Clash of Kingdoms novel. This is the first in a series, and I think as well this is quite possibly one of my first cover buys of BookTube. I think this book is gorgeous. I love the cover, the typography is absolutely beautiful, and that is one of the only reasons I really bought it. This hardback is kind of like leather effect, and it's got an embossed pattern in there. You can't see it because it's so white. Just everything about this book I think is gorgeous, but the plot seems nothing like incredibly special to me. This is about a young girl whose father is murdered, and the alleged killer is her father's old apprentice and the only friend she's ever known, so she has to go on a dangerous journey across countries with, I don't know, is there dark magic? Probably. Dark magic, warring kingdoms, blah blah blah, to find the real killer. I admit the plot itself doesn't jump out at me. I don't think this is going to be like a new favourite read when I do get round to it. But it's such a beautiful book that I don't want to ever unhaul it because it's just gorgeous. So I will read it eventually and hopefully like it. If you've read this one, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'll like it. Next up, I have Witch Sign by Den Patrick. This cover is absolutely beautiful, and I have the sequel to this one as well here. Stormtide. I have the sequel, but I haven't read the first one. But this sounded really good to me, and it still does sound really good to me. In fact, it was on a TBR at one point. I was going to start a buddy read for it, and then life happened and I just never got round to it. Again, a beautiful book that's been on my TBR for far too long. And this takes place in a world where once upon a time dragons ruled, but it's been like 75 years, I think. 75 years since the dragon's rule of fire and magic was ended. This new empire has tried to like wipe out all of the arcane magic, everything like that from the world. They've tried to wipe it all out. However, children are still born with the sign of the witch, these witch marks, and the empire dispatches people to go and find these people and kill them. No one knows when these people will appear and enforce the Empire's law, but today they're coming, and may the gods help those who bear the sign of the witch. And I'm going to assume our main character, who is a young girl named Kjelren, I'm going to assume she has this witch mark and is therefore at risk. But yeah, I really do want to read this. It's a beautiful looking book that I've had for a really long time, and I want to read it kind of soonish because I don't want to risk not getting the third book in hardback if I want it, because the hardbacks are just gorgeous books. And I have a little promotional bookmark in here as well from when I got it. I feel like it's a similar story with this next one, which is Blackwing by Ed McDonald. In fact, I have 3 books in this series. Ah, there they are. You can't see them, they're up here. Ravencry and Crowfall. I have 3 books in this series and I haven't read any of them. Hope, Risen, Humanity, The Misery Destroys Them All. This one is about a world where there is a patch of land called the Misery, and that's where like the hopeless people go. Only 3 kinds of people willingly enter the Misery: the desperate, the stupid, and the greedy. The Misery is a wasteland, a dangerous, corrupted frontier between the Republic and the Deep Kings. When traitors, thieves, and spies try to flee, they run for the Misery. And often as not, it's Captain Riel Gallero's job to bring them to heel beneath the fractured skies, provided they haven't already fallen prey to the twisted creatures that inhabit the shifting, polluted sands. It's a deadly place, even for a man of Gallero's experience, but it's a necessary place because the Republic's only other defence against the Deep Kings is Null's Engine, a weapon of incomparable power that protects the wasteland's border. And that final defence may have failed. It sounds like it's going to be kind of a little bit dark, a little bit dangerous, a little bit grim. I don't know. It sounds like it could be pretty brutal. And I actually have a bookmark in here from when I started it once upon a time, and got to page 27 and never continued. So it's back on the TBR. I think I will enjoy this when I get to it. I just don't know when that's going to be, but it sounds like the sort of thing I would enjoy. It sounds like it's that like political fantasy with that bit of brutality in there. It sounds like a recipe for something I'm really going to enjoy, so I do hope to read it eventually. If you've read this one, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I would enjoy it. Next up, I have Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. This is pitched as like a YA Game of Thrones. I didn't love Game of Thrones, but I've heard fantastic things about this series, so I picked up a paperback copy a long time ago. This is a beautifully floppy paperback. Absolutely love it. But yeah, I've heard fantastic things from so many people about this series, and I just haven't got there yet. I don't know if there's a little bit of intimidation because it comes from like such a big series. The series itself is really long. Or if it's that like YA Game of Thrones comparison that's maybe putting me off a little bit, I don't know. But what is this one about? In a land where magic has been forgotten and peace has reigned for centuries, unrest is simmering. 3 kingdoms battle for power. A princess must journey into enemy territory in search of a magic long thought extinct. A rebel becomes the leader of a bloody revolution. A sorceress discovers the truth about supernatural legacy she is destined to wield. It's the eve of war. Each must choose a side. Kingdoms will fall. Sounds again like something that I would probably really like. Political fantasy is my thing with that little bit of magic in there. Sounds like I would really enjoy it. So why have I not picked this up yet? I don't know. But here, it's on this list. It's on this list of 10 TBR vets. If YA fantasy comes up for TBR vet, for TBR Pursuit, it will have its time. I'm actually excited to read this one. Why have I not read this? I haven't actually picked the book up in such a long time and read the back. Good to know. Interest has peaked again. Next up, we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is so many people's favourite. So many people absolutely love this. Let's not talk about Ready Player 2 because I know a lot of people don't love that one. But a lot of people really love this one. It had its movie made and that was wildly popular. It still has a Waterstone sticker on it. But this is a world where there's this VR game that everyone plays. It's wildly popular. The creator of this game dies and leaves Easter eggs in the game, and whoever finds them basically gets all the riches and becomes the owner of that company, I think. Imagine the world at stake, an epic struggle between good and evil, the greatest quest in history, a fate of humanity resting in your hands. Are you ready? Again, it's one that I really think I'm going to enjoy. I just haven't had the courage to pick up yet. I'll get there, I promise. And then finally, last but not least, we have Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas, and let me just shrink out of frame. I started the Throne of Glass series a long time ago. I got stuck after Crown of Midnight because I really didn't like it. I eventually read Heir of Fire and liked it a lot more and was like, yeah, okay, I could get on with this, and then I have not picked up Queen of Shadows. That's a lie. There's a bookmark in it. I got to page 18 and then put it down, and I have not picked it up again, and that was a long time ago now, and it's still on my shelf, as is the rest of the series. So I have all intention to one day continue. One day. I don't know when. I just don't love this series as much as everyone else does. I have not fallen in love with these characters at all. My intrigue is not that high. Like, I'm not desperate to know what happens. I feel like I very much don't care, but I have the whole series. I will get through them all eventually. I cannot promise when, but eventually I will get there. So it's only right to include Queen of Shadows as the last book on this list because it's been on my TBR for ages. This is book 4? Yeah, book 4 in the Throne of Glass series, by the way, which follows Selena Sardothian, who is this amazing assassin, and she is in prison and the prince gets her out of prison, but she has to compete in some trials to be the king's champion to earn her freedom. It's been a long time since I read the first book, and after the first book the plot goes in a very different direction, but that's essentially the plot of the first one. She's an assassin competing in some trials for her freedom and the position of King's Champion. But there we have it. There are my 10 TBR vets that have been on my TBR for a really long time, and I will eventually read. Maybe. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you've read any of these, if you have any opinions on whether I will like them or if I really should just not bother with any of them, let me know down below. I appreciate your advice and your guidance. Once again, thank you ever so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Thank you to you for hanging out with me for another day of Vida, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye!